It started with the sound of metal tearing through the night. I don't remember the crash clearly, just the flash of headlights, the screech of tires, and then silence. They told me later that the driver ran. A hit, the kind of story you scroll past on the evening news. Except this time, I was the one in it. When I woke up, everything felt strange. The world looked the same, but it didn't fit right anymore. My husband was there every day, sitting by my hospital bed, holding my hand, telling me he loved me and that everything was going to be okay. He looked at me with eyes full of worry, full of love, and I wanted so badly to feel that love back. But I couldn't. It's not that I lost my memory. I remember our wedding, our vacations, the way he used to make me laugh until I cried. But those memories feel like they belong to someone else. Like I'm watching an old movie and recognizing the woman on the screen, but she isn't me anymore. The doctors said the brain injury might affect my emotions, that my sense of self could shift, that familiar things might start to feel foreign. They were right. Everyone says I'm still me, just a little slower, a little more tired. But deep down, I know something fundamental changed. The woman who loved him so deeply, she's gone, and the part of me that remains doesn't love him anymore. I tried to fake it. I smiled. I said I love you too when he said it first. I thought maybe the feeling would come back, like muscle memory. But every time he held my hand, it felt wrong. Every time he kissed me, I wanted to pull away. He's still the same man, kind, patient, doing everything right. But to me, he feels like a stranger pretending to be my husband. Sometimes I stare at him for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be in love with him. But all I feel is guilt. Guilt that I can't give him what he deserves. Guilt that my damaged brain has rewritten the story of our love. My therapist said this isn't uncommon. After a traumatic brain injury, that sometimes emotional connections just don't return. I nodded, but I didn't tell her how empty it feels to look at the person who used to be your whole world and feel nothing. My friend says I should tell him the truth, that pretending is cruel. But isn't it even crueler to tell someone that your love for them died in a car crash you survived? So, I keep pretending. I keep playing the role of the woman I used to be, but every night, when he's asleep beside me, I stare at the ceiling and wonder if love can disappear just because of one broken moment in time. Was it ever real at all? When I left the hospital, everyone kept saying, "You'll feel better once you're home." But when I stepped through the front door, it didn't feel like home at all. It felt like stepping into a stranger's life. The same grey couch, the same wedding photos, the same scent of coffee in the morning. Everything was exactly where it used to be, but somehow none of it felt like mine. There's a picture hanging in the hallway, our wedding photo. I'm in a white dress, leaning against Mark, laughing at something he said. Every time I look at that picture, I feel this strange disconnect. I know that's me. I remember that day. But the woman in that photo, the one who looked at him like he was her entire world, she isn't me anymore. Mark tries so hard. He makes my favorite meals, puts on the same old records we used to dance to, tells stories about us like he's trying to remind me of who we were. He thinks if he keeps replaying the past, maybe something inside me will wake up. But it doesn't. The harder he tries, the more distant I feel. One morning, he handed me a mug of coffee and said softly, "You always liked it black. No sugar." I stared at the steam rising from the cup and said, "I don't know if I still do." He looked surprised, but smiled anyway. I could see the hope flickering behind his eyes, that fragile, desperate hope, and I hated myself for not being able to give him what he wanted. The doctors tell me to get out more, go for walks, meet people, reconnect. So I tried. One afternoon, I stopped by the little cafe near our house, the one we used to go to every weekend. The barista recognized me right away. "Hey, haven't seen you in forever. Still getting the iced latte for you and Mark?" she asked cheerfully. I forced a smile and said, "Sure." But inside, all I could think was, I don't even know if he still likes latte. I don't even know if I care. At night, after Mark falls asleep, I wander around the house like a ghost. I touch the furniture, the books, the things that used to define us. I can recall memories attached to each one, dinners, laughter, lazy Sundays, but they feel hollow, like echoes from someone else's life. Sometimes I stand in front of the bookshelf for minutes, staring at the novels I once loved, wondering who that woman was who picked them out. I started crying one night, not because I missed who I was, but because I realized how trapped we both are. Mark still loves me. He loves the version of me that no longer exists, and I'm just pretending for him, pretending for the sake of our history, pretending because I don't know what else to do. He keeps saying, "I'll wait for you. I'll wait until you feel like yourself again." And every time he says it, it breaks something inside me a little more. Because he doesn't understand, I am myself, just not the one he fell in love with. A few weeks ago, he took me out to dinner at the same restaurant where he proposed. Everything was identical. The dim lights, the quiet music, even the same table. The waiter smiled and said, "The usual, right?" I nodded. Mark looked at me, smiling gently, his thumb brushing over my hand. "I love you," he whispered, his voice trembling just a little, and I looked at him, this man who had been through hell for me, who still believed love could conquer anything, and I felt nothing, no spark, no warmth, just guilt, so heavy I could barely breathe. That night, I cried again, but not for me, for him, because he's still fighting for a love that died the night metal met glass and everything went black. And I'm the ghost who keeps pretending to be alive, just so he won't have to face the truth. The day I realized things would never go back to normal wasn't some big dramatic moment. No tears, no shouting, no fight. It was just quiet. Mark was at work, and I was sitting in the living room. Sunlight spilling through the curtains, dust floating in the air like tiny ghosts. I was staring at my wedding ring, this small circle of gold that used to mean everything. And I suddenly thought, why am I still wearing this? I slipped it off and set it on the coffee table. It left a pale mark on my skin, a ring-shaped shadow of the person I used to be. For a second, I expected to feel something, guilt, sadness, anger, but all I felt was relief. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but real, and it terrified me. When Mark came home that night, he noticed. Of course he did. His eyes went straight to my hand. "You're not wearing your ring," he said softly. I froze, trying to find an excuse. I mumbled something about physical therapy, about swelling in my fingers. He nodded, but his eyes lingered, full of worry. He didn't press it though. Mark never presses. He just swallows the pain and pretends he's okay. The next morning, I went to therapy again. My psychiatrist, Dr. Green, asked me how things were with my husband. She has this calm, soothing voice that makes you want to tell her everything, even the things you're ashamed of. I told her the truth, that I don't feel connected to him, that I don't know if I ever will again. She nodded, took notes, and said, "It's not unusual. After a traumatic brain injury, emotional disconnection can occur. Sometimes the emotional pathways tied to certain people or memories get disrupted. It's not your fault, not my fault." Those words sound nice, but they don't fix anything. They don't help when I see Mark sitting alone at dinner, trying to make conversation while I drift somewhere far away in my head. They don't help when he reaches for my hand and I flinch without meaning to. Later that week, my best friend, Emma, came over. She's the only person I've been honest with, really honest. We sat on the porch, the late afternoon light turning everything gold. She handed me a glass of wine and said, "You've got to tell him, you know. You can't keep pretending forever." I sighed. "If I tell him, it'll destroy him." She looked at me for a long moment. "Maybe, but keeping this secret will destroy you." I wanted to argue, but she was right. Every day that passed, I felt like I was fading more, living half a life, split between guilt and numbness. Still, I couldn't imagine looking into Mark's eyes and saying, "I don't love you anymore." It felt cruel, inhuman, like kicking someone who's already bleeding. That night, I tried something different. Instead of lying beside him in silence, I asked him about his day. He smiled, genuinely smiled, like it was the best thing that had happened to him in weeks. We talked for an hour, about work, about the neighbor's new dog, about nothing important. And for a moment, I almost believed maybe we could make it work. But then he said, "You sound like yourself again," and that broke me. Because I wasn't myself. I was performing, saying the right things, laughing at the right times, all to keep him from seeing the truth. After he fell asleep, I lay awake, listening to his breathing. The man lying next to me is my husband, the one who held my hand through the hospital nights, who never gave up on me, who still whispers, "I love you," into the dark. And yet, lying beside him feels like lying next to a memory, something beautiful that I can touch, but never feel again. And for the first time, I began to wonder, maybe this isn't just about the accident. Maybe the love I lost wasn't stolen by my brain injury. Maybe it had already been fading long before that night, and I just never had the courage to see it. I started to realize that life after the accident didn't just change my body, it changed the way I saw the world, and more painfully, the way I saw him. Everything that used to seem endearing about Mark now made me feel suffocated. The way he spoke so carefully, the way he forced a smile even when I could tell he hadn't slept in days. I looked at him and didn't see my husband anymore. I saw a man desperately trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. And the worst part was, I no longer wanted to hold on with him. I still went to therapy every week, both physical and psychological. In the rehab room, I practiced balance, practiced using my hands, practiced remembering sequences of movement. But outside, I was practicing something else, pretending to be normal, pretending to still love, to still care, to still be the woman Mark once loved. One afternoon, I saw him standing by the door, watching me finish my exercises. His face lit up when I managed a few steps without the cane. But behind that proud smile was a kind of hope that scared me, a belief I no longer shared. That night, as I stepped out of the shower, my hair still dripping, Mark looked at me and said softly, "I miss the old you." I turned to him. "Who was that?" He didn't answer right away. There was a long silence, heavy and sharp. Then he said, "I still dream of us walking by the lake." You were laughing, and I remember wishing time would stop right there. I whispered, "Maybe it did." For you. After that, neither of us spoke. I heard him exhale and leave the room. The door clicked shut, and I suddenly felt myself trembling. Not from cold, but from fear. Fear that I had truly lost something I'd never get back. A week later, during therapy, Dr. Green gave me an exercise. Try to recall a happy memory with Mark, she said. Don't just describe it, feel it. I closed my eyes. I saw us sitting on a park bench in the fall, leaves swirling around, sunlight soft and golden. He had his arm around me. I knew I'd been happy then, but when I tried to feel it again, it slipped away like mist through my fingers. I opened my eyes. I remember it, I told her, but I don't feel it. She nodded gently. Sometimes emotions detach from memory. We remember the story, but the heart doesn't respond anymore. It's like rewatching a movie you once loved and realizing it doesn't move you now. That sentence haunted me the rest of the day. That evening, I sat in the car, watching Mark through the windshield as he shopped inside the store. He was picking up the same brand of milk I liked, checking expiration dates like he always did. He was still him, caring, patient, kind, still trying, still loving me the only way he knew how. But to me, he'd become a stranger wearing a familiar face. A soft, quiet kind of estrangement that was somehow cruel in its honesty. If someone asked, I'd still say, he's a good man. But good isn't the same as love, and I didn't know when those two words stopped meaning the same thing. On the drive home, I watched the city blur past the window, the yellow streetlights, the wet asphalt, an old song playing faintly from the radio. Everything was familiar, yet it all felt like a dream I'd wandered into by mistake. I turned to look at Mark. He was softly humming along, his face tinted red by the traffic light. And right then, I realized I had loved him once, deeply, completely, so much that I couldn't imagine life without him. But now, what I felt was only gratitude, not love. When we got home, he took my hand gently and asked, "Are you feeling better?" I smiled. "Yeah, a lot better." He looked relieved, happy even. But deep inside, I felt a quiet storm beginning to rise. I knew I was standing at the edge of a choice, one that would change everything, one that would make it impossible for us to ever go back. That night, I couldn't sleep. The streetlights spilled through the curtains, casting thin lines of gold across the ceiling. I thought about life, about memory, about how easily love can slip away when a part of yourself is gone. And I finally understood, sometimes loss doesn't come from an accident, but from the moment you realize something inside you has already died, long before you ever noticed it. I don't know what exactly pushed me to make the decision that night. Maybe it was the restless sleep, or maybe it was the moonlight spilling through the curtains, making everything feel like a dream I couldn't wake up from. But when I opened my eyes that morning, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I didn't want to lie, not to Mark, and not to myself. Breakfast went on like any other day. Mark brewed coffee, I toasted bread. The kitchen smelled of butter and roasted crumbs. The radio hummed with the morning news. He asked if I wanted sugar in my coffee, and I said, "No, thank you." Such a simple, harmless exchange, yet inside, every word felt like a quiet goodbye. I looked at him, the man who had once been my whole world, and realized I'd been preparing for this moment in silence for weeks. "Mark," I started, my throat tightening. He looked up and smiled. Yeah. I set my cup down and took a deep breath. We need to talk. His smile faltered. He folded his newspaper and straightened up. What's going on? I thought about softening it, saying something like, I don't know what's happening to me, or I'm trying to understand how I feel. But when I met his eyes, warm, worried, full of hope, I couldn't lie. I don't love you the way I used to, I said quietly. Or maybe, I don't love you anymore. I mean, I can't feel it. The room fell silent. The only sounds were the clock ticking and my heartbeat thudding in my ears. He didn't speak. His eyes went blank for a second. Then he gave a crooked smile, one that looked more like a defense mechanism than comfort. I get it. It's because of the accident, right? I nodded slightly. Maybe. The doctor said emotions can change, but I don't want to blame it all on that. I just know that, inside me, things aren't the same anymore. He was quiet for a long time. Then his voice cracked. I don't know what to do without you. I wanted to say something, but every word felt cruel. I placed my hand on the table, close to his, then slowly pulled it back. I don't know what to do either. I just know I can't keep pretending. Mark stood up, pacing the room. His shoulders trembled. I didn't know if he was holding back tears or rage. When he finally turned around, his eyes were red. So I've already lost you, haven't I? I looked at him, and in that moment, every memory flooded back. The laughter by the lake, the way he smiled when I slipped on ice, the warmth of his arms on cold nights. I remembered everything, but I didn't feel any of it. All I felt was pity for him, for myself, for what we used to be. Maybe you never really lost me, I said softly. Maybe I just changed, and you stayed the same. He sat down, covering his face with both hands. The room was so quiet, I could hear the wind slipping through the crack in the window. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I didn't move. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew that if I touched him now, it would be out of pity, not love. The conversation ended in silence. I grabbed my phone and wallet and walked out of the house. When I reached the door, Mark spoke, voice trembling. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes. I stopped, but didn't turn around. Don't, I said softly. Don't wait for someone who might never come back. Outside, the cold air brushed against my face, carrying the scent of wet grass and early morning dew. I walked down the familiar street, the same trees, the same traffic sign, the same corner where we once took pictures together. But I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. I knew I'd lost something, a part of myself, and a man who once loved me with everything he had. Yet beneath all that emptiness, there was something faint, a breath, a flicker, freedom, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. And maybe, to truly live honestly, sometimes you have to accept being the cruel one. The days that followed passed slowly, as if time itself wanted to stretch out so I could fully feel everything, the emptiness, the guilt, and the strange sense of freedom. I moved into a small apartment downtown, just me, a few simple belongings, and a silence so heavy it sometimes scared me. In the mornings, I made coffee, watched sunlight spill through the narrow window, and wondered what Mark was doing. Maybe he still got up early, brewed coffee for two, and then realized there was only 1 cup left. I didn't block him. We still texted short, polite messages, like two strangers trying to be decent. He'd ask, "Are you okay?" And I'd reply, "Yeah, I'm fine." but we both knew it wasn't entirely true. I still dreamed of him, but in those dreams, his face was fading, his voice blurring like an old recording breaking apart with time. One afternoon, at therapy, I told Dr. Green I had left him. She was silent for a long while, then asked, "Do you regret it?" I thought for a moment and said, "It's not regret. It's just sadness. Like finishing a book you know you'll never read again." She smiled softly. Sometimes endings are part of healing. When I walked out of her office, autumn leaves were scattered all over the sidewalk. The air smelled faintly of rain. I saw a couple walking hand in hand, laughing about something small. The woman leaned her head on her husband's shoulder, and I suddenly remembered I used to be her. I used to be that happy. But now I understood something. Happiness doesn't vanish. It just changes its shape. That night, Mark texted me. "I was cleaning my office today. Found the card you gave me our first year of marriage. You wrote, 'No matter what happens, I'll always choose you.' I just wanted to say, I'd still choose you, even if you don't choose me anymore." I read that message over and over, my eyes stinging. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't hurt either of us. I just sat there, looking out at the city lights, glowing gold and soft against the dark. And in that moment, I realized love can fade, but gratitude doesn't. I was grateful that Mark had loved me fully, and I was grateful that he had let me go when I was no longer myself. A few weeks later, I met Emma at a cafe. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You look different. Lighter, somehow." I smiled. Maybe because I'm not living to please anyone anymore. She squeezed my hand and asked, "Do you think love ever comes back?" I thought about it, then shook my head. Not in the same way. Maybe one day I'll love again, but not to fill a void, because I've learned how to live honestly, without fear of losing. That night, when I got home, I opened the window. The air carried the scent of rain and the hum of traffic fading into the distance. The city stretched out before me, vast, lonely, but alive. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid of being alone. I felt peaceful. I knew that tomorrow I might miss Mark again, might feel the ache return, might question my choices all over. But maybe healing isn't about forgetting. It's about being able to look back without pain. And that night, in the quiet of my little apartment, I whispered to myself, I'm not who I was. But maybe, finally, I've found who I am. Winter came earlier than I expected. On those freezing mornings, I'd wrap myself in a thick coat, clutch a cup of hot coffee, and walk slowly through mist-covered streets. My life had settled into a new rhythm. No more date nights, no more shared dinners, no more arguments or makeups. Just me, my work, therapy sessions, and the quiet moments I used to understand myself. Sometimes I thought maybe this was exactly what my brain needed, a blank space to rebuild, to redefine everything, even love. Once, during a group therapy session for patients recovering from brain injuries, a middle-aged man said, after I woke up, I realized I didn't love my wife anymore. But then I learned to love her again, not because of memories, but because of who she is now. His words stayed with me for days. I kept wondering if I could ever love Mark like that, not for the past, but for the person standing in front of me. I decided to see him again. We met at a small cafe by the river, the same spot where we'd had our first date. When I walked in, he was already there. His eyes were as gentle as ever, but something about them looked tired. He smiled, a familiar smile, but somehow distant. We talked about work, about our health, about old friends. Everything felt polite, calm, and strangely detached. In the middle of our conversation, Mark asked quietly, "Do you ever think we could start over?" I fell silent. His gaze met mine, fragile, almost pleading, like he was hoping for a small miracle. I took a deep breath and said, "Mark, I've tried to remember what it felt like loving you, needing you, believing that only you could make me happy. But it's not there anymore. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to pity you, and I don't want to lie to myself." He nodded slowly, saying nothing for a while. Then, softly, "I understand. I think I lost you the day of the accident. I just didn't want to admit it until now." His words hit me like a quiet storm. There was no anger, no blame, only the tender sadness of someone finally letting go. We sat there, watching the river drift under the golden lights, and in that stillness, I realized something. Love can die silently, but kindness remains. I no longer loved Mark, but I still wished him happiness. Maybe that was a different kind of love, quiet, mature, without demands. When we said goodbye, he hugged me gently. No words, no promises, just warmth, familiar, but no longer electric. It felt light, like closing a book you once couldn't put down. As he walked away, I watched his figure fade into the night air, and I knew, this time, it was truly over. That night, I looked at myself in the mirror. The face staring back was mine, but the eyes were different. No longer lost, no longer clinging to what was gone. I smiled, not out of joy, but from the calm recognition that I had survived the storm and finally seen the sunrise. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today, I saw him again." No tears, no resentment, just gratitude for what we once were. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready to live it for me. And that night, as the city fell asleep outside my window, the same lights, the same sounds, the same cold wind, something inside me had changed. I wasn't searching for love to hold on to anymore. I just wanted to live fully, with a heart brave enough to feel and peaceful enough to let go.